My older brother and his pregnant wife broke into my house and started living there without my permission. I had to call the police. My brother's been making my life miserable for as long as I can remember, and my parents just don't want to see it. To them, he's the perfect golden child. So, I packed my bags, left town, and tried to start fresh. But no matter how far I go, it feels like my past is right there, breathing down my neck. How do I even begin to move on? I guess writing this is my way of trying to figure that out. Maybe I just need to see it all laid out, make some kind of sense of it. Or maybe I'm hoping someone out there will tell me I'm not crazy for feeling like I've been stuck in some messed up version of reality for the last 22 years. Whatever the reason, I can't keep this bottled up any longer. Here's a bit of background. I grew up in a small town, one of those places where everybody's in each other's business, and my family was no different. There was me, my older brother Noah, and my parents, who, even now, act like they only see what they want to when it comes to their golden boy, Noah. It was always clear he could do no wrong. If Noah got a bad grade, it was the teacher's fault. If he stayed out too late, my parents would just laugh it off with a boys will be boys, and when he did something outright wrong, like breaking a vase or throwing a tantrum at 16, they'd somehow find a way to blame me. "Why did you make Noah so upset?" they'd ask, as if I had anything to do with his outbursts. And those outbursts, that was the worst part. Noah was like a bomb with a faulty timer. One minute, everything would seem fine. Then bam, he'd explode. And when he did, it wasn't just slamming doors or yelling. Noah got physical. I was always the one he took it out on. Being 5 years younger meant I didn't stand a chance. When we were kids, it started small. He'd shove me or knock things out of my hands. It seemed like normal sibling stuff at first, but it didn't stay that way for long. By the time I hit middle school, Noah's roughhousing had turned into straight-up beatings. He'd use his fists, feet, whatever he could grab. I'll never forget the time I was 13, and Noah was in high school. I'd borrowed one of his video games without asking. Stupid, I know. He stormed into my room, shut the door, and just started hitting me. Felt like it went on forever. By the time he was done, I could barely see out of one eye. My face was so swollen. I thought, this has to be the moment they finally see him for what he is. But when I went to my parents, beaten and desperate, they just looked at me like I was the problem. My mom's only question was, "What did you do to make him so angry?" That's how it always was. Noah was their flawless golden boy, and I was the inconvenient younger brother they had to put up with. I wasn't allowed to get angry or upset. If I ever tried to stand up for myself, my parents would tell me I was making a big deal out of nothing, that I was being dramatic. I was always told I was being too sensitive. I had to be the one to rise above it all, never Noah. He never had to change or apologize. This pattern went on all the way through high school. I got pretty good at covering bruises and coming up with excuses. Eventually, I stopped inviting friends over. I didn't want them to see the chaos I was dealing with. On the outside, I kept it all together, straight A's, clubs, anything to play the role of the perfect student. I guess I thought if I was flawless enough, if I did everything right, my parents might finally see me. But no matter how hard I tried, Noah was always their priority. I'll never forget my high school graduation. It was supposed to be a big deal, a celebration of all the hard work I'd put in. I was even the valedictorian. But, of course, Noah had to make it all about him. He was in college by then and decided to come home for the ceremony. I should have known something was up. He'd barely spoken to me since he'd left for school. Part of me hoped he'd come back to support me for once, but that was wishful thinking. After the ceremony, we had a small gathering at the house. Just some family and a few close friends. I actually felt good for once, like maybe things were turning around. But then Noah cornered me. He had this smug grin on his face, and I knew nothing good was coming. "Congrats on the speech," he sneered, his voice full of sarcasm. "Too bad it's all downhill from here." Before I could say anything, he grabbed my arm, tight enough to leave a bruise, and leaned in. "You'll never be as good as me. Don't even waste your time trying." I wanted to scream in his face, tell him to go to hell, but I didn't. Even at 18, even as a legal adult, I was still terrified of him. So, I bit my tongue, forced a smile, and pretended everything was fine. just like I always did. But that was the moment I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. As soon as graduation was over, I started making my escape plan. I applied to colleges as far away as I could. When I got accepted to a decent school 3 states away, I didn't think twice. I packed my things and left without a second glance. The first few months away were strange. I felt like I didn't know how to exist without the constant fear of Noah's next outburst hanging over my head. It was like I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting him to suddenly show up at my dorm and drag me back home. But he didn't. For the first time, I was free, or at least I thought I was. College was supposed to be my fresh start, and in many ways it was. I threw myself into my classes, made a few friends, even joined some clubs. It felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in years. But there was still this nagging feeling I couldn't shake. Like, no matter how many miles I put between me and my old life, the shadows of my past were right there, trailing just behind me. I couldn't shake the damage that had already been done. I tried to push it all to the back of my mind, but the memories wouldn't stay buried. Night after night, I'd wake up drenched in sweat from nightmares about Noah, my heart pounding, my breath catching. Sometimes, I'd hear someone shouting down the hall, and for just a split second, I'd be convinced it was him, ready to explode. It didn't help that my parents were still in regular contact with him. Every call home was the same. They'd gush about how great he was doing. Noah's excelling in his classes. Or Noah's working so hard. It was like, good for him, but what about me? When it came time to look for a job, things only got harder. After my second year of college, I figured I should get some hands-on experience. I was studying business, so I thought an internship or even a part-time job would be a smart move. But finding one was a whole other story. I must have sent out dozens of applications, but I either wasn't qualified enough or the positions were already taken. My confidence took a nosedive, and I couldn't stop thinking, Noah probably would have found something by now. My parents weren't exactly a source of encouragement. Every time I'd call home, they'd ask if I'd landed a job yet. When I said no, their response was always the same. Maybe you're just not trying hard enough. It felt like they had no idea how hard I was actually pushing myself. No matter what I did, I was never enough for them. Even now, that feeling of being second best, of never measuring up, hangs over me like a cloud. That's why this summer I made a decision. I moved to a completely different city, hoping that even more distance would finally help me heal. But honestly, I don't know. Some days, it feels like I'm just running in circles, trying to escape something that's always right behind me. There's this voice in my head that keeps whispering that no matter how far I go, I'll never outrun Noah's shadow. He'll always be the golden child, and I'll always be the one scrambling to pick up the pieces he left behind. So, after breaking away from my family and landing in a new city, I finally started to breathe a little easier. This place was everything my small town wasn't. Busy, anonymous, and filled with possibilities. The first thing I did was get settled into a tiny, one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, but to me it felt like real freedom. No more hiding, no more treading carefully around Noah's unpredictable moods. I could finally live for myself. With my business degree nearly finished, I set my sights on finding a job that would let me actually use what I'd learned. It took a few stressful months, but eventually, I got hired at a mid-sized marketing firm called Brightwave. It wasn't some flashy, high-powered job, but it was exactly what I needed. A clean slate and a chance to start building something new for myself. It was the start of my career, and I was eager to prove myself. On my first day, I met a lot of people, but 3 of them made an immediate impression. Ethan, Logan, and Mia. Ethan was the kind of guy who seemed to have every aspect of his life together, while I felt like I was barely keeping up. He was sharp, focused, and always appeared to be ahead of everyone else. Logan, on the other hand, was more relaxed and had a playful attitude, but he had a talent for coming up with creative and brilliant ideas. Mia was the one who kept our group connected. She had an energy that was both positive and contagious, and she had a way of making everyone feel like they were part of something important. We became friends quickly. At first, it was just casual. We would go out for drinks after work or hang out on weekends. Nothing seemed too serious or deep. However, over time, something started to change. I began to realize that Ethan, Logan, and Mia were not just coworkers but were turning into real friends. They were the kind of friends I never had before. Unlike my brother Noah or my parents, they actually cared about what I had to say and supported me without judging me. As our bond grew stronger, we started coming up with some crazy and imaginative ideas. These were the kinds of ideas that most people would dismiss as unrealistic or impossible. Despite that, Ethan, Logan, and Mia were always excited to give them a try. One of the first wild ideas I brought up was something even I was not sure we would follow through with. There was an abandoned building downtown, an old warehouse that had been empty for years. One night, after a few too many drinks, I joked that we should break in and throw a secret rave there. To my surprise, Logan's face lit up with excitement, and he said, "Let's do it." We spent the next few weeks carefully planning every single detail of the event. We figured out how to get inside the building without being noticed, how to set up the lights and sound system without attracting attention, and how to invite enough people without letting the party get out of hand. It felt like we were organizing a massive heist, and the whole experience was both exhilarating and terrifying. The night of the rave was something I will never forget. We expected a small crowd, but hundreds of people showed up, far more than we had anticipated. For hours, the warehouse was packed with people dancing to loud music, surrounded by flashing lights and the energy of the crowd. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something bigger than myself. It was a reckless and foolish thing to do, but it was also the most alive I had ever felt. Eventually, the police arrived and started breaking up the party. We barely managed to escape just before they stormed the warehouse and shut everything down. For the next few days, we kept a low profile, fully expecting to get into serious trouble. However, nothing ever came of it, and the entire event turned into a legendary story that everyone in the city seemed to know about. For a brief period, we were the center of attention, and it felt incredible. After that, we became addicted to the thrill of doing something exciting and unpredictable. We started pushing the boundaries even more, searching for that same rush we had experienced during the rave. We started pushing the boundaries even more. Ethan, always the careful and strategic one, suggested we invest in cryptocurrency. This was before it became a huge trend, so none of us really knew what we were doing. We figured we might as well give it a try, so I threw in a small amount of money, and the others did the same. It was one of those impulsive decisions where none of us really expected anything significant to happen. Somehow, though, the value of our investment shot up a few months later, and we found ourselves with a decent amount of profit. It was not enough to change our lives completely, but it was enough to make us start thinking about what we could accomplish. If we managed to pull that off, what else were we capable of doing? That was when I started feeling restless. I had been working at Brightwave for nearly 2 years by that point, and although I was succeeding, getting promotions and climbing the ranks, it did not feel like enough. I wanted something more. I wanted to create something of my own that was not tied to anyone else's expectations or standards. I started toying with the idea of starting my own marketing consultancy. At first, it was just a distant dream that I casually mentioned to Ethan, Logan, and Mia. They were all encouraging, but I was not sure if I was ready to make such a big leap. My thoughts kept going back to Noah, and I wondered if I was just chasing something that was never meant for me. Mia refused to let me think that way. One night, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You have spent your whole life living in someone else's shadow. It is time for you to step into the light." Her words hit me hard, and I decided that she was right. I quit my job at Brightwave and started building my own consultancy from scratch. Ethan and Logan were there to support me from the beginning, with Ethan handling the financial side and Logan contributing his creative ideas. Mia was my biggest supporter and closest friend, always believing in me when I doubted myself. Her encouragement made all the difference. The business grew faster than I ever imagined it would. Within 6 months, I had a solid client base, and word began to spread that I was the go-to person for marketing strategy in the city. It felt surreal. I had spent so many years feeling like I was trapped in Noah's shadow, but suddenly, I was standing tall and proud on my own. However, success also brought new challenges. The first big surprise came when Logan, who had always been a bit unpredictable, decided that he wanted to take things even further. He proposed the idea of buying out a struggling nightclub and transforming it into the most popular spot in the city. It was a risky move that sounded borderline foolish, but Logan was absolutely convinced that it would work. He had an incredible talent for predicting trends before they became mainstream, and he was certain that this was going to be a massive success. Despite my reservations, I agreed to go along with Logan's plan. We pooled our money, took out a loan, and bought the nightclub. At first, it seemed like we had made a huge mistake. The place was in terrible condition, and the costs of renovation and upgrades were piling up faster than we expected. I started to panic, wondering if we had bitten off more than we could chew. Those familiar feelings of doubt came rushing back, and I could not help but wonder if I was destined to fail. Logan, however, was relentless and refused to give up. His enthusiasm was contagious, and he threw himself into the project with everything he had. We spent months working on the renovations, creating a brand new image for the club, and planning the grand opening. Ethan managed the finances carefully and made sure that we did not go over budget while we were getting everything ready. Mia was in charge of marketing, spreading the word about our new venture and building excitement in the community. It was exhausting work, and there were many moments when I feared we had made a colossal error. Finally, the big night arrived, and I had no idea what to expect. The line to get inside the nightclub stretched around the entire block. The music was loud, the lights were stunning, and the atmosphere was absolutely electric. We had somehow managed to pull it off, and the nightclub quickly became the talk of the city. In just a few short months, we had taken a failing business and turned it into the most popular venue in town. It felt like another victory and another step toward building a life that was truly my own. My marketing consultancy continued to thrive, and now we had a successful nightclub generating steady income. Other business owners in the city began to take notice, and we started receiving offers to collaborate on new projects. It was everything I had dreamed of, but it also came with new pressures. Running two businesses at the same time was overwhelming, and I quickly realized that success brought its own kind of stress. The good moments were amazing, but the challenging ones were harder than I ever expected them to be. I often found myself working late into the night, obsessing over every detail, and worrying about whether it would all fall apart. Despite the anxiety, I kept pushing forward, motivated by the support of my friends and the recognition I was receiving in the industry. Mia was my biggest source of strength, constantly reminding me that I deserved every bit of success I had earned. She made it clear that I had nothing to prove to anyone, not even to myself. Eventually, the nightclub became so profitable that we decided to expand our business. Logan was always full of new ideas, and Ethan's careful planning helped us stay grounded and make smart decisions. We opened a second location in a neighboring city, and it turned out to be just as successful as the first. I began to feel like there was nothing we could not accomplish as long as we worked together. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was living under someone else's shadow. I was no longer Noah's little brother or the kid who could not meet expectations. I had become my own person, and I was building a name for myself that had nothing to do with my family's legacy. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders, and I could finally breathe without restriction. However, I learned that moving forward was not just about escaping my past. It was about facing it head-on and acknowledging that my doubts and fears would always be a part of me. I had to confront those feelings and keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it was. For the first time, I was not running away from something, but running toward a future that I had built for myself. I thought the club would be a complete disaster. It had a terrible reputation, and nobody wanted to be associated with it. However, Logan managed to turn the situation around. He rebranded the club, hired some of the best DJs, and somehow transformed it into a popular spot. Within a few months, the club was packed every weekend, and we were making a significant profit. It should have been a huge victory, but instead, it marked the beginning of the end. As the club's success grew, Logan began to change. He became obsessed with it, devoting all his time and energy to the business while distancing himself from the rest of us. It did not take long for tensions to rise. Ethan, who was always the voice of reason, tried to convince Logan to slow down and take a step back, but Logan would not listen. He had experienced the excitement of success, and he did not want to let it go. The real turning point came when Logan decided to throw a massive New Year's Eve party at the club. He wanted to go all out, bringing in celebrities, pyrotechnics, and everything else to make it the biggest event of the year. Ethan and I both thought it was a terrible idea. The costs were sky high, and we did not have the resources to pull it off without risking everything we had built. Logan, however, ignored our concerns and went ahead with the party. The event was a complete disaster. The club was overcrowded, fights broke out, and by the end of the night, the police had shut everything down. We were hit with fines and the negative press was relentless. In just a few hours, we went from being the hottest club in the city to the biggest scandal. After that night, Logan's behavior took a turn for the worse. He blamed everyone but himself for what had happened, and it was not long before our arguments escalated into a full-blown falling out. Ethan tried to mediate between us, but it was too late. Logan quit the business, leaving us to deal with the aftermath. I will not deny that Logan's departure hit me hard. I had considered him a true friend, someone who was in this venture with me from the beginning. In the end, he cared more about his own ambitions than about our friendship. It made me realize that, no matter how far I had come from my past, there would always be people like Noah. People who would take advantage of others until nothing remained. However, unlike in the past, I was not going to let this setback destroy me. I still had Mia and Ethan by my side, and I still had my business, which remained strong despite the chaos Logan had left behind. I had worked too hard to allow one failure to undo everything I had accomplished. Now, I find myself sitting in my office, looking out at the city that has become my home. I am considering starting my own agency, something bigger than just a consultancy. I want to create a full-fledged marketing firm, a business that could make a real impact in the industry. The idea is both terrifying and exciting. For the first time in my life, I am not just surviving. I am thriving, and it feels incredible. Yet, there is always that voice in the back of my mind, the one that sounds so much like Noah, telling me that I will never be good enough. I have learned to ignore it, but I know it will always be there, challenging me. Despite that, I have come too far to give up now, and I am ready to keep pushing forward, no matter what doubts or fears may linger. That voice in my head keeps insisting that everything I have worked for will eventually fall apart, no matter how hard I try or what I accomplish. I am still trying to figure out how to silence it permanently. Writing this all down has helped me, and I am grateful to anyone who has taken the time to read my story. If anyone has advice on dealing with friends who turn against you or overcoming self-doubt after a lifetime of feeling inadequate, I am open to suggestions. After the chaos with Logan and the disaster at the nightclub, I truly believed I would never work with him again. The aftermath was brutal, both emotionally and financially, and the divide between us seemed far too wide to bridge. However, life can be unpredictable. A few months passed after the nightclub incident, and I focused all my energy on running my consultancy, which was still performing well despite the setbacks. Ethan and Mia remained loyal, and we began discussing new ways to expand the business. I kept myself busy, hoping it would fill the void that the nightclub failure had left behind. Out of nowhere, Logan reached out to me. I saw his name on my phone and felt a wave of conflicting emotions. A part of me wanted to tell him off for abandoning us during such a crucial time, but another part of me, the part that still remembered the good moments we had shared, wanted to hear what he had to say. After a moment of hesitation, I decided to answer the call. Logan's voice sounded quieter than I remembered. He said he knew he had made a huge mistake and that he did not deserve another chance, but he wanted to make things right. I let his words sink in, unsure of how to respond. A part of me wanted to hang up immediately, but something kept me from doing so. Perhaps it was the sincerity I heard in his voice, or maybe I was not ready to close that chapter completely. I told him that we could meet, but I was not making any promises about the outcome. A few days later, Logan and I met at a small coffee shop downtown. It was clear from the moment I saw him that he had been struggling. He looked exhausted, worn out, and far from the confident person he used to be when we were running the nightclub. We ended up talking for hours, revisiting everything that had happened. Logan confessed that he had let success go to his head and that he had been chasing something bigger without considering the consequences. He apologized for abandoning the business and for how he had treated all of us, especially me. It was not easy to listen to, but I could tell he was being sincere. By the end of our conversation, I felt a shift inside me. I was not ready to forgive and forget, but I understood that there might still be a chance to move forward. It would take time and effort to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, but I realized that I did not have to close the door on him entirely. I contacted Ethan and Mia that night and told them about my meeting with Logan. Both of them were skeptical at first, which I completely understood. They had witnessed firsthand how Logan's ambition had almost destroyed everything we had built. After a long discussion, we decided to give Logan another chance, but with one strict condition. This time, we agreed that everything would be done differently. Everything had to be legal, above board, and with a clear and detailed plan. Logan agreed to our terms without any hesitation. Over the next few weeks, we spent countless hours brainstorming ideas, trying to figure out what kind of business would suit all of our strengths. Logan, as always, had grand ideas. He wanted to create something that could expand rapidly and gain widespread recognition. Ethan took a more cautious approach, emphasizing the importance of sustainability and avoiding another collapse. Mia, who was always the mediator, helped us find a balance between Logan's ambition and Ethan's caution. After many discussions, we decided to launch a digital marketing agency that would focus on helping small businesses and startups. It seemed like a natural extension of the consultancy I had been running, but with Logan's talent for branding and his contacts in the nightlife and entertainment industries, we knew we could take it to a much higher level. We named the new company Bright Line Marketing and immediately began working to bring our vision to life. This time, we were determined not to repeat the mistakes we had made with the nightclub. We did everything by the book, making sure we obtained the proper permits, drew up clear contracts, and established a solid legal structure. We each took on specific roles to ensure the business ran smoothly. Logan was in charge of client acquisition and branding. Ethan managed the financials and operations. Mia took the lead in creative direction, and I oversaw strategy and client relationships. As we worked to get the business off the ground, we decided to revisit an idea we had toyed with before: cryptocurrency. The small investment we had made months earlier had grown significantly, and we were beginning to see substantial returns. Logan, always eager to take risks, wanted to increase our investment, confident that the market was about to experience a major surge. I felt hesitant at first, as we were just starting to build momentum with Bright Line, and I did not want to jeopardize everything on the unpredictable world of cryptocurrency. Ethan, who had been carefully following market trends, agreed with Logan. He believed that we had a unique opportunity that we should not pass up. Mia, always ready for a new adventure, supported the idea without hesitation. In the end, I decided to trust my friends and follow their lead. We pooled our resources and invested a significant portion of our profits into a range of cryptocurrencies, focusing on several lesser-known coins that Logan had thoroughly researched. It was definitely a risk, but it was one that felt well thought out. Meanwhile, Bright Line Marketing started to gain momentum. Our client list grew, and the quality of our work earned us a positive reputation in the city. We began to see that our efforts were paying off, and our business was thriving. This time, we were not just hoping for success. We were building it, step by step, with a solid foundation and a clear sense of purpose. Within a few months, our digital marketing agency, Bright Line Marketing, secured several major clients. These included a local tech startup and a national restaurant chain that needed help with a complete rebranding after a public relations crisis. Word of our success spread quickly, and we began expanding faster than any of us had expected. About 6 months after we launched the company, the cryptocurrency market experienced a massive surge. The obscure altcoin we had invested in, which hardly anyone had noticed before, skyrocketed in value, increasing nearly 78 times from our original investment. Overnight, we went from moderately successful business owners to millionaires. I will never forget the moment when I checked my cryptocurrency wallet and saw the numbers on the screen. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing client reports, when I received a notification on my phone. At first, I thought there must have been some sort of glitch because the value could not have increased that drastically in such a short time. However, when I refreshed the app, the numbers were still there, and my heart almost stopped. I immediately called Ethan, who answered the phone right away. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, sounding just as shocked as I felt. "Yes," I replied, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. "We're rich." The next few hours were a complete whirlwind. We called Mia and Logan, and the four of us spent the entire day in disbelief as we watched the value of our investment continue to rise. By the end of the week, we had officially become millionaires, and the whole experience felt surreal. However, the sudden wealth brought not only new opportunities but also new challenges and pressures. One of our first major decisions was to figure out how to manage all the money we had made. Ethan, who was always practical, suggested that we reinvest some of the profits back into bright line marketing and use the rest to diversify our investments into real estate, stocks, and other ventures. Logan, on the other hand, wanted to take bigger risks. He talked about opening more businesses, expanding Brightline internationally, and even starting a tech company. In the end, we found a compromise. We decided to reinvest a portion of our cryptocurrency earnings back into Brightline marketing, while using the rest to purchase several commercial properties around the city. We turned these properties into co-working spaces for startups and small businesses, meeting the increasing demand for flexible office space. This move allowed us to grow our portfolio without taking on excessive risk. I also bought a house, though calling it a house hardly did it justice. It was more of a mansion, and I spent $430,000 on a property that was far too large for just me. It felt almost absurd, but after everything I had been through, I decided that I deserved a place where I could finally feel at peace. The house was located in a quiet, upscale neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, with a massive backyard, a luxurious pool, and a stunning view of the nearby hills. It became a reminder of how far I had come, a space where I could enjoy a life that was now truly my own. I finally had enough space to host the kind of parties I had only dreamed about growing up. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly made it. I had a successful business, a close group of friends, and more money than I knew how to spend. As the months went by, I began to realize that success was not as simple as I had imagined. The first surprise came when Logan, who had always been the most ambitious among us, began talking about starting his own venture. He had been working on a side project, an AI-driven marketing platform, and he believed it would be the next major breakthrough. At first, I did not take his plans too seriously because Logan often came up with big ideas that rarely led anywhere. This time, however, he was determined. One evening, after a long day at the office, Logan sat me down and told me that he was leaving Brightline to focus on his new business. He said, "I am not abandoning you. I just need to follow this path because it is something I have to do." I felt torn between understanding his motivation and feeling deeply hurt. On one hand, I knew that Logan was always looking for the next big challenge. On the other hand, I could not help but feel betrayed. We had built Brightline together and faced every obstacle side by side. And now, just when things were going well, he was leaving. This time, his departure was not due to a failure or a fight. It was because he had found something bigger that did not include me, Ethan, or Mia. We said our goodbyes on civil terms, or as civil as they could be under the circumstances. Logan launched his AI marketing platform, and within a year it had become a massive success. I kept running Brightline with Ethan and Mia, and we continued to expand. Despite the steady growth and success of our company, there was always a sense that something was missing. I learned that true success is not just about money or business achievements. It is about the people you surround yourself with and the relationships you build along the way. As I sat in my huge mansion, surrounded by all the material possessions I had ever wanted, I could not ignore the feeling that I was still searching for something more meaningful. Almost 2 years had passed since I moved into the mansion I had bought. My life was better than I could have ever dreamed. Brightline was doing exceptionally well. Our investments had paid off, and I had finally created the life I had longed for, free from the shadows of my past. Ethan and Mia were still with me, and we were expanding the business faster than we could manage. We even brought in new talent, including Sarah, a brilliant graphic designer who turned ordinary campaigns into viral successes. Although everything appeared perfect on the surface, I knew that my journey was not over. There was still a part of me that felt incomplete, like I was searching for something that went beyond money and professional success. I understood that true fulfillment meant more than financial security or business accomplishments, and I was still on a journey to discover what that truly meant for me. Aaron, a former lawyer who'd shifted gears to become a business strategist, was the one who guided us through the wild ride of rapid growth. But anyone who's weathered the highs and lows of life knows that good times are never guaranteed to last. The storm hit me out of nowhere. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, and I was lounging by the pool, soaking up the peace. Later that evening, I was supposed to meet Ethan and Mia to go over details about a new client. But for now, I was content just to unwind. That's when I heard the doorbell. At first, I figured it was just a delivery or maybe a neighbor stopping by. But when I swung open the door, I froze. There he was, Noah. My stomach dropped. It had been years, yet he looked nearly the same, tall, confident, with that same intense, calculating gaze. But there was something different about him, a kind of desperation I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then I saw her standing beside him, a tall woman, visibly pregnant, with an anxious look in her eyes. His wife. I didn't even know he was married. "Hey, little brother," Noah said with a smile that didn't come close to reaching his eyes. I struggled to find my voice. What are you doing here?" "Can't I drop by and visit my little brother?" he replied, his words laced with a mocking edge. Without waiting for me to respond, he pushed his way inside, his wife trailing behind him, silent and hesitant. I immediately felt my defenses go up. Noah, barging in after all these years without a word. This was no friendly reunion. He gave the place a once-over, eyes drifting from the high ceilings to the polished floors and the expensive furniture. "Nice place," he said, nodding with that smug look. "Way better than the dump I'm stuck in." I just stood there, waiting for him to get to whatever twisted point he had in mind. I knew him well enough to know this wasn't idle chatter. Finally, he stopped, his expression shifting from fake pleasantry to something colder. "Let's get to it," he said, nodding toward his wife, who was still lingering by the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "This is Emily. She's pregnant. We've got a baby coming in a few months, and the place we're in isn't going to cut it for a family. We need more space." My heart sank. I had a terrible feeling I knew what he was about to say. He didn't miss a beat. "We were thinking," he continued, "this house would be perfect for us. It's big, in a nice neighborhood, and, let's face it, you don't need all this space. You're here alone, right?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. He showed up out of nowhere, after everything he'd put me through over the years, and now he had the nerve to ask for my house. "No," I said, my voice firm and unyielding. "Absolutely not." The fake smile vanished from his face, replaced by an icy, furious glare. He took a step closer, his tone hardening. "I'm not asking, little brother," he sneered. "I'm telling you, we need this house. You're going to give it to us." I stood my ground, my heart hammering in my chest. "I'm not giving you anything, Noah. This is my home. I worked for it, and you have no right to come here and demand it." His face twisted with fury, and for just a second, I saw a flash of the old Noah, the one who used to terrorize me as a kid, beating me senseless whenever he didn't get his way. But I wasn't that scared child anymore, and I wasn't about to back down. Noah stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You owe me, Jake. You've had everything handed to you, while I've had to fight for every scrap. You really think I'm going to let you walk away without giving me what I deserve?" Emily, his wife, shifted nervously behind him, her eyes wide and full of regret, but she didn't say a word. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "I don't owe you a damn thing," I shot back, my voice shaky with fury. "Everything I have, I earned. What about you? All you've done is bully and fail your whole life. There's no way I'm handing over my house." And then, without warning, everything went south. Before I had time to react, Noah lunged at me, pulling something from his pocket. Took me a split second to realize what it was. Brass knuckles. He swung hard, his fist crashing into my side, the cold metal digging into my ribs and driving the air from my lungs. I stumbled backward, gasping for breath, but he didn't let up. His next blow caught me square in the jaw, sending a shock of pain through my skull as I crashed to the floor, my mouth filling with blood. Somewhere behind me, I heard Emily's panic screams, but it was all a blur. Noah was relentless, raining down punches, his rage fueled by years of pent-up resentment. I tried to fight back, but he was stronger, and those brass knuckles gave him a brutal edge. I couldn't tell you how long it lasted, seconds, minutes. It all felt endless. By the time he was finished, I was barely conscious. My face was a swollen, bruised mess. My ribs felt like they'd been crushed, and blood was pouring from my nose and mouth. Noah loomed over me, breathing hard, his fists still clenched and ready for more. "You should have just given me the house, Jake," he snarled, spitting the words like venom before turning away. He grabbed Emily's arm and dragged her out, leaving her pale and trembling in his wake. I lay there, helpless on the cold floor, the agony swallowing me whole. I couldn't even muster the strength to call for help. It felt like hours before I heard the sound of a door opening and saw Ethan and Mia rushing in. They were supposed to meet me later, and thank God they showed up when they did. The next few days blurred together in a haze of pain and confusion. I had a severe concussion, several broken ribs, and more bruises than I cared to count. The doctors told me I was lucky, that if Noah had kept going, I might have ended up with permanent brain damage or worse. Ethan and Mia were beside themselves when they found out what had happened. They never left my side, staying with me through the entire nightmare, their anger at Noah burning as fiercely as my own. They refused to leave me alone at the hospital, hovering like protective guards, especially Ethan. He was the one who first brought up pressing charges. "We're not letting him get away with this," he said, his jaw set with determination. "He's going to pay for what he did." At first, I hesitated. Noah was my brother, after all. But as I lay there in that bed, replaying the brutal attack again and again in my mind, I realized I couldn't just let it slide. Noah had crossed a line, and if I didn't take a stand now, he'd never stop. So we pressed charges. The court case turned out to be a grueling ordeal. Noah, unsurprisingly, denied everything. He spun a tale where I was the aggressor, claiming he'd acted only in self-defense. But the evidence was stacked against him: hospital records, pictures of my injuries, and, most importantly, Emily's hesitant but crucial testimony. It was all too much for him to dismiss. Aaron, the lawyer we had hired for our business, took on the case, bringing all his legal expertise to bear. He was relentless, dismantling Noah's lies piece by piece, revealing the ugly truth for the court to see. Eventually, Emily broke down on the stand. Tears streaming down her face, she admitted that she had been too scared to tell the truth at first, but that Noah had been the one who attacked, not me. The trial dragged on for what felt like an eternity, each day wearing down my nerves. But finally, after weeks of testimony and cross-examinations, the verdict came down in our favor. Noah was sentenced to 5 years in prison for aggravated assault. It wasn't the harshest sentence, but it was enough to ensure he'd be locked away, unable to harm anyone for a while. The victory felt complicated. On one hand, justice had been served. Noah was facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty and violence. On the other, he was still my brother, and a part of me ached for what he could have been if he hadn't been swallowed by his own bitterness and rage. Recovering wasn't easy, physically or emotionally. The bruises and broken ribs healed in time, but the deeper wounds lingered. Some days, the weight of it all was crushing. No matter how far I ran, it felt like the ghosts of my past were always just a step behind me, waiting to catch up. But I wasn't alone. Ethan, Mia, Aaron, and even Sarah, who had become one of my closest friends, stayed by my side every step of the way. They helped me through the hardest moments, refusing to let me face the darkness alone.